Hello, my name is Myre, and this is the Star Citizen monthly report for April 2021. Alright, that's all the intro I have time for. Let's get into it. It's a long one, I think. Alright, so it says, following the release of Alpha 3.13 and the upcoming Invictus launch week, April's PU monthly report touches on both work players can experience now and in the next few weeks. As usual, there were plenty of longer-term tasks undertaken and completed throughout the month too, with interesting updates on Orison, upcoming ships, and server meshing in the following report. Alright. Okay, and of course, here is that first image here. Let's not skip through it because it's a pretty big deal. This, of course, is apparently Crusader. When we open up the image, it does say Crusader Atmosphere 14, so it's, I suppose, the 14th atmosphere shot they took before they were like, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I think this might be a thumbnail for us. But yeah. We had comments already that this doesn't really look like any Crusader we've really ever seen before. It looks like... Anyway, so I don't know how to disable that. I paused it, but anyway. Thank you, Tuvo. Alright. So, anyway, this isn't any Crusader that we've ever seen before. So, I guess this is just what Crusader's gonna look like now, with pink clouds and like a blue sub Crusader. Alright. What a stellar specimen, indeed. Alright, let's go ahead. Alright, so AI content. So throughout April, AI content focused on completing the first pass of the security, tourist, and tour guide behaviors, polishing animations from recent mocap sessions, and adjusting the related behaviors. They also implemented the first version of the landing officer, one of the deck crew that will be used in hangars, landing zones, and capital ships. The landing officer gives players directions on how to position their ships in relation to the pad for perfect descents. Wait, what? So, right now when you like hail a station, it just says please proceed to the following landing pad, right? So they're implementing an NPC that'll tell you to go to those landing pads, but also to what? To give you like real-time directions? Interesting. I still would rather like have like a HUD element that would like show where I am relative to like the pad, like in Elite Dangerous, but this is interesting too. Alright, so work also continued on the hygiene behavior, with the team completing setups for the toilet and shower cubicles and their relative block-out animations. For sleep behaviors, new animations for beds were set up to support physicalized sheets. And the process of standardizing the proper usage of bed shutters began. Alright. So bed shutters like the ones on the Hammerhead where you can lie on the bed and then like you can basically just like turn the bed into a cubicle so people can't see inside, which I guess could also work as a way of like spawning and despawning the NPCs that use the beds as well. They also progressed with the ongoing goal of propagating vendor behaviors to as many shops as possible. They're currently designing and blocking out the different elements that will make up the various locations, coffee shops, differing food stalls, etc., and are enabling the available kiosks to use the hawker behavior too. So there's going to be like an NPC that's going to be like, roll up, and that kind of thing. because why not? Alright, so AI features. A bunch of AI stuff this month. So AI, for April, so AI features improve the subsumption tasks used to queue requests in the communication system to link directly to DataForge entries. This allows the designers to select communication configurations and channel names from a dropdown instead of having to manually type the string names. So I guess less user error for them. So patrol path tech was further developed, while the usable system code was reworked to refresh the usable archetype and used channel archetype flags of an entity post-initialize. This is still English. The movement blocks that install an NPC to a usable were refactored to rely on the usable component for their internal logic, as the usable component should abstract the AI knowledge of how to interact with the world and not delegate to all other possible components of the game. Okay. Work also progressed on combat behaviors for untrained characters, such as civilians. Alright, okay, so we've heard of, like, rookie, and we've heard of veteran NPCs, like, for, like, gunplay and that kind of thing. They've never talked about, like, a level below rookie, so civilians. This involved making sure they'd react appropriately to combat scenarios and try to preserve their lives as best they can, which is affected by what weapons, if any, they have available to them. The team also improved the reaction distance definition that was causing NPCs to react incorrectly to the player's presence when fighting in some situations. I had my fingers crossed that they were talking about when NPCs like notice you going into a store or just standing next to them and they'll greet you, but soon. Spaceship behaviors related to subcomponent targeting were worked on, with the ability to find the root targetable entities from any targetable object added. The data gathered can be used in flight tasks to perform specific maneuvers, such as allowing a ship to sphere strafe to attack a subcomponent on a specific sector of the ship. They also updated the AI seat weapon controller components to handle missiles. Okay, so like an actual NPC is going to be handling missiles instead of the ship's AI just doing it. Support began for spawn closets, including implementing handling for the on-despawn request event and the initial pass of the despawn activity. Currently, the entity will look for a usable in the spawn closet action area and use it. If that fails, it'll move to a random position in the area. Okay. Exonier in chat says they did say that the NPC Javelin crew going about their business. There will be NPC crew going about their business. Oh, I see. So it'd be interesting to see if going about their business aboard the Javelin includes things like, the hygiene stuff and the going to bed stuff. That being said, if we're taking a tour on the Javelin, which is coming out in on the 20th or the 21st, it'd be weird in some ways if the tour allowed you to go to, like the bunks, and it's like, wow, so that's where the Navy starmen sleep. The guy's like, could you not? I'm trying to sleep. Although because they have shutters, it would make sense, I guess, Alright, so that was that for AI features. So in AI tech, so one of the tech team's focuses throughout April was navigation links for the navigation mesh. Work involved restructuring the code to allow navigation link entities to specify extenders, which act as code bridges between game code functionality and the navigation link. This provides navigation system-specific data in a format that can be correctly used during pathfinding. For example, they can now create an extender that uses an explicit offset to connect two nav mesh locations on an animation. The animation can also motion warp markers in a similar way to how Mantle is currently used by players. It's currently being used in Squadron 42 to allow the Van Duel to jump on and off objects of varying heights. They're like 9 foot tall and like they're really athletic. But it can scale to anything needed for environmental traversal by any character type. For EVA, they completed tasks to allow NPCs to systematically transition from 0G into a usable, and vice versa. For example, AI characters can leave the cockpit of a ship smoothly and then process a 3D movement in zero gravity. They can filter the appropriate enter-exit animation so that the 3D path correctly starts or ends at the appropriate location too. So just more smarter NPCs in general. April also saw the team convert the subsumption component to use the ECUS in-range changed event. This uses the more efficient entity component update system API and improves the assignment handling to ensure that assignment requests are propagated correctly from the queue when changing the in-range state. They also fixed how the master graph event queues when propagated into the newly selected activity when handling assignments, which is used to select the appropriate sub-activity when the transition is delayed. Finally, for AI, the team continued to improve the flow graph functionality for requesting a custom function assignment. This was achieved by adding support for dynamic input and output variables defined in the selected global function. Ultimately, this will ensure the team can correctly create feature test levels to validate the test behavior content and the related features in a scalable way. So, I've said this before, and I'll say it again just because, I mean, like, if it's going to continue to be a thing, I guess it should be mentioned somewhere. It's really awesome that every month we get a lot of information about everything going on behind the scenes at CIG. But some things are just so painfully technical that it feels as if they need an editor just for this, just to make it so that, you know, a potato head like me can actually understand what the heck is going on. But yeah. Animation. April saw the team work on tourist and tour guide animations, blockouts for vendors, and the holo greeter for an upcoming event. Maybe perhaps Invictus, perhaps? In parallel, the facial team worked on assets for the tourist, tour guide, holo greeter, race announcer, and staggers. Alright, so art characters. So April saw the character art team wrap up refinery deck assets, which the majority of outfits for Orison and the hospitals were modeled and skinned. A few outfits for Alpha 314 progressed well too. The team continued modeling armor coming later in the year and supported an X-ray shader and skeleton model for medical gameplay UI. Finally, work progressed on backpacks and holographic projections for the physical inventory UI. So physical inventory is something coming for 3.14, and we feel it's gonna really change how the game works, you know? Like, we don't know if everything in that physical inventory will disappear when you die, like it does for certain subcomponents and components already on ships. But yeah, that being said, like medical gameplay is also something slated for 3.14, and it looks like there's supposedly an X-ray shader, which basically like means that there might be a tool that when you like move it over a player, you'll be able to see their skeleton, which maybe you might be able to see, you know, just by looking at them, if they have like a fracture or whatever. It wouldn't be too hard to do. I've seen somebody do this in VR chat. In fact, I've done this in VR chat. As for how that's going to pertain to medical gameplay in Tier 0, I don't know. It's very wishful thinking to see if anything of that nature will come in that early. Like, oh, he's got a fractured skull. We need to like put a cast on it or something. Anyway, so art environment. So throughout April, the landing zone team further developed Orison, which moved into the final stages of production. Other disciplines are currently focusing on closing out the location, with all major platforms, shipyard structures, and rings now final art complete. The global composition of the landing zone was also locked down, and transit routes have been finalized. Though background platforms are still progressing throughout the final art phase. I guess the background platforms are going to be ones that players don't generally go to. The team also bug fixed and optimized the halls for Invictus launch week. So following the release of Alpha 3.13, the modular team switched focus back to colonial outposts. The majority of room architecture and props moved into the final art phase. Materials were finalized and additional visual additions and units were created. A gameplay geometry pass was also done in Greybox to better prepare the modules for combat, which involved exploring alternate routes and cover locations. A combat scenario was tested on a planet too, with the team continually making adjustments based on feedback from design. Okay, that's cool. So like they obviously have different elements of gameplay planned for these outposts. They're not just going to be like landing zones that you go to in order to, you know, like buy and sell stuff that you currently do right now. There is also emphasis on making sure that like when they get released, you'll be able to do things like combat and everything else. With the end goal, you know, hopefully being that as a player, you can also like own one. In which case, like not only trade, but also the storage of commodities and also combat and defending it will all be things that you'll need to have. All right. And then Montreal's modular team finalized their work on the Orison and New Babbage hospital maps. The polish phase is nearing completion, with the team preparing to move on to the LOD pass and bug fixing. So Red Dawn says, I don't want them to dumb it down. I love reading things like that. It's how actual development is. And that's fair, Red. I mean, that's fair. I'm not saying that they, you know, they make it like they remove what they're talking about, but just to massage the language so that like anybody reading it doesn't necessarily have to have a background in game development to know what, you know, propagation is. They could do things like, you know, have a what's the word called again, an appendix at the bottom of this, so like you would know what they're talking about, because a lot of it is very esoteric. You have to have known what they're talking about to understand the progress being made. Otherwise it's like, oh okay, yeah, progress has been made in this, you know, because half the time it's like progress has been made in X that I don't know what it is, that will help to improve Y, which again I don't know what it is. A glossary would be amazing at the very least. Yeah, I don't want a secret code to have to decipher everything. I wouldn't say summaries either, you know, just a glossary at the least would do wonders. Anyway, so here we are. We have some concept art for Orison. This is Orison General, I guess the general pad or the general strut. There's an information desk. We have people walking about. It looks like, yeah, the pharmacy is over there. Somebody's being pushed on a wheelchair. Wheelchairs confirmed CIG. We have, yeah, the Brentworth Care Center. Again, a different angle of that same pad. This is the New Babbage Archipelago, which is just a very fancy way of saying New Babbage collection of islands, because they're all floating islands. Wait a minute, New Babbage Archipelago? Huh. So, like, they've named, like, I guess this group of struts after the main city of Microtech. That's kind of cool. Might be a bit confusing, but kind of cool. And of course, there's also an insurance office over there. Whether or not they'll actually, you know, like the door will open or whatever, like come 3.14 or 3.16 or whatever this is coming out is to be seen. But eventually you'll have to go to these insurance places for, you know, everything that involves. But there are tons of locations within even, I think, Microtech, you know, like the Salon and stuff that don't exist yet. But we'll have to wait until, you know, like Barbertech Tier 0 for that to happen, I guess, you know. Alright, so April was an exciting month for Planet content. So Crusader is looking great, and the positive reception from the community on the screenshots we shared boosted the team's motivation. The Planet content team. The artists also explored new types of height maps for the Pyro system that can generate steep canyons. Alright, so like, I feel for the longest time they've talked about how it's almost impossible to have like 90-degree like vertical kind of like cliffs and stuff. Well, it looks like they're exploring ways of making very steep canyons for Pyro, so that'll be cool to see. I feel like every single planet and moon right now in Stanton has something different to offer. So with the amount of moons and stuff coming in for Pyro, I'm looking forward to seeing what they could possibly do different. So work is still ongoing with the team making additional polish passes over the next few months. They also looked further ahead to Nyx. Though the system's planets are still in the early stages of development, new asset packs were blocked out based on the location's art direction. The next stage is to move the assets towards the final art stage and begin creating planetary surfaces. So Digital Purgatory says, I'd rather they spend money on devs than someone to massage the technical language personally. I mean, it wouldn't take that much effort, one would imagine, to have a glossary of terms, especially if the people who are talking about the stuff know what they're talking about, you know? It wouldn't require somebody to have to edit this. It wouldn't require a full job. Even though it could, it doesn't have to. It could just be somebody else who already works in the, you know, a CIG's extra duties. I don't know. I don't know enough about what goes on behind closed doors. But it would still be nice. It'd be nice if they were to massage things a bit. Alright, so art ships. The US-based vehicle content team and other supporting teams worked hard to complete the release prep phase for the Tumbril Nova and the last major review. Treads, movement, and gameplay feel were the focus. So this is the first vehicle in the game that is gonna have like tank treads. How or if they were to scale this up or scale them down, because this is new tech that they'll, you know, suddenly have, so that'll open the door for this kind of stuff. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but that's cool. To see that it's not just, from what we've read here in this like really short sentence, it's not just like an animation, it's a whole thing. So we are now into a proper QA testing cycle and are working on making sure the polished vehicle and experience are going to make players happy. Good luck. The Nova tank has been a concerted effort by all, and we're proud of everyone's contributions and are excited to see it go live. So progress was also made on the Rsi Constellation Taurus, so the last of the Connie lineup, the supposedly the more simple of the lineup, the cheapest one on the pledge store, but the most structurally different in terms of its hull. So last month saw the ship move through the release prep stage, with a focus on finishing the complicated LODs, or levels of detail. There we go, brain worked. White Box was also completed for a highly anticipated ship due for release later this year. What is this highly anticipated ship? So they recently, on the roadmap roundup, which we also recorded, so should be on YouTube if anybody's watching this on YouTube right now, they talked about the Corsair, they talked about the Vulture, and they talked about the Banu Merchantman. So it could be any of these three. So support was also given to Alpha 313. Alongside other work, tech art addressed bugs for the recent patch release, including docking, signed distance fields, elevators, ramps, and operator seats. Alright, for art weapons, the weapons team continued to move the standalone Greycat tools through the pipeline, with the tractor beam going into final art and the salvage tool going through White Box. They also iterated on medical tools alongside the UI design teams, who progressed with wider feature work. Focus was also given to bug fixing for Alpha 313. For weapons, or ship weapons, a handful of bespoke weapons were developed for some ships featured in an upcoming event. Which upcoming event? So obviously, I don't think that they would necessarily talk about Invictus by name, because they don't normally do that. Invictus is the one coming up. Other than Invictus, the only other event I can think of is the dynamic event that Tony Z mentioned, which is the Ninetales Lockdown, which you wouldn't imagine would have bespoke weapons. So who knows? Who knows? So they say, we can't say much at this point, but a number of bespoke weapons have been given some love to make them sit better with the ship in question. Curious, very curious. We kind of think that they have a ship that they're going to release, obviously, with Invictus. It's about that time of year. I don't think that they have announced any ships this year at all, so now would be the time. Especially since, like, this time last year, the Perseus was announced, so we'll see. We'll see. Although, yes, as said in chat, the Crusader Ares does have a bespoke weapon, but it only has the one bespoke weapon. We'll see. Alright, so audio. The audio team onboarded 2 junior sound designers and 1 junior technical sound designer. to meet the development requirements of Star Citizen and Squadron 42. That's right, the ion on the info now. For Alpha 313, they completed an ambiance pass on the new cave interiors to embed them into the planetary locations and completed all unique audio for the Greycat ROCDS, locomotion and moving parts. They also supported the new ship-to-ship docking feature, designing and shaping the audio experience for the gameplay loop, including the UI and docking-undocking sequences. This gameplay loop as well of the docking is supposedly supposed to be partially used when we get ship refueling using the Starfarer and its refueling arm. Tasks, and also it's also used in the ship-to-station docking too, currently. So tasks were also completed for Invictus Launch Week, including an ambiance pass for the new expo halls with SFX, dialogue, and music. Audio tasks were completed for Alpha 314, with the team focusing on Horizon. Expect new and interesting ambient sound designs and brand new music from Pedro Camacho for this location. With the landing zone being the first cloud-based city, there are certainly interesting challenges and opportunities to engage with. All right. And Pedro has been like the premier audio guy for so long. There have been others as well, but I don't think CIG really referred to them by name. You know, there are other individuals who have done things like the rest stop sounds and stuff, whereas, you know, Pedro has been the guy for most other major locations. So community. So the community team started April announcing the Origin 404 that coincided with the UEE holiday Triggerfish, which is April Fool's Day in the verse, and they showed off the Origin 404, which people think might actually be a hint to something else. Look at those thrusters. All right, so the all-digital CitizenCon 2951 was announced, and Q&A for the Greycat ROCDS was published that answered community questions on Alpha 313's new twin-user mining vehicle. Hey, look at that, the Stanton 7, which I'm a commentator for, Racing League, kicked into high gear this month, which saw the top 16 teams racing across Clio and Walla. The rules for each heat are available on the Stanton 7 website, as well as team leaderboards, and a look at amazing rewards that wait for the fastest drivers in the verse. That's cool. CIG giving the Stanton 7 props there. That's awesome. All right, and Gankin in chat, who is currently in the lead, actually, for the Stanton 7, currently representing Team Far Out. Gankin, aka Diplomat, has been one of the fastest racers consistently in the Stanton 7. All right, so engine. So in April, the physics team continued to improve vehicle support, including the steering limit of a neutrally turning tank and the gravity of a free-falling tank. The wheeled vehicle code was further cleaned up too. So yeah, this the Nova tank or tonk is supposed to be I guess orbital drop ready or something like that. What I want to do when the tank gets released is have have one of our PvP ops where we have one team defending one of the locations that have the emplacements, and then another team which just basically is you're allowed to just do whatever. And I would love to see the other team try and actually drop tanks at the location. I think that would be so cool. Yo, Crucian Gaming's in chat too. Crucian is my co-host with the Stanton 7, and yeah, they mentioned us, dude. How cool is that? All right, so engine. So in April, yes, dropping tanks is apparently a thing that they're working to make sure it works. All right, so for Alpha 313, a solution was found to enabling floating point exceptions on Linux servers, which will help the team to get to the root of issues quicker, meaning a faster turnaround on bugs. All right, that's what I want to know. For numerical robustness, several improvements were made when converting double precision floats to either single precision floats or 32-bit integers. All right. So engineering is always the most complicated part, but at least we know about the free-falling tanks. So engineering continued work on the G12 renderer, enabling parts of the new Gen 12 render path by default and starting the full transition to the new architecture. They also continued to port render passes alongside the graphics team. For example, the Scaleform UI render path received an initial commit to port it to Gen 12. The shader parser received several new improvements and optimizations too. So what does that mean for us? So the Gen 12 renderer is like, I guess, well, once it comes in, is supposed to help improve frame rates somehow. They talked about how it was supposed to like really help with things like Star Marine and like Theaters of War. Of course, it'll also help in the verse, but the verse has a lot more working parts that can also tank performance. What's interesting is that like I already get like 80 plus FPS in like Star Marine, so any more is of course welcome, but to know that the G12 renderer isn't properly in yet and we're getting performance like that is good news. Alright, so work continued on the volumetric cloud system, with April seeing a pass on efficient empty space skipping on the Raymarcher. The SDF generation was further optimized and a required refinement pass was also implemented. Research continued into ways to generate and apply sign distance fields, and with the initial SDF generated, work commenced on integrating them into the Raymarch process. I don't know if Raymarch is actually a word that we can Google. Nope. So for cloud modeling, the artists can now specify a custom set of volume textures per planet to shape clouds, as not every planet has clouds resembling those on Earth. That's good to know. Alright, so on the core engine side, the job manager received further improvements, with the team introducing an explicit per thread and fiber info block to reduce contention in some of the threading backends. In the near future, they'll improve outlock implementations to make fewer unnecessary thread wake-ups and few kernel calls when simultaneously waking up more than one thread. Additionally, they removed contention in one of the threading backends by switching the scheduling algorithm from a lock-protected priority queue to a lockless approach of fixed-size producer-consumer queues with aging. For post-mortem profiling, they saw the first results in visualizing collected data in a newly written tool that's more user-friendly and flexible. Unlike this paragraph, time in April was also dedicated to server meshing. Alright, this existing star hash logic, which is used for server object container streaming, was moved to the network module in preparation for a later move to a server meshing service. The assert pipeline was revamped and streamlined for more effective issue tracking too. This also involved introducing data assets in case malign data causes code to run in unexpected conditions, allowing issues to be directly assigned to the relevant content team. So, work continues as always with server meshing. Lastly, code was implemented to mark unused texture slots in materials to guide automated asset dependency tracking, which will keep game data bloat in check. Good to know. We've been having some like server deadlocks and stuff and like client deadlocks and stuff, so hopefully that'll all be part of that mess. Alright. Yo, Enigma, I can't massage that. I have no idea what they're talking about. So, features. So, characters and weapons. To support the next iteration of player inventory, the team spent part of April working on several UI features. Significant work went into the ability to drag and drop items between the player character and new inventories. So we can already kind of drag and drop stuff, or at least drag around stuff within like the inventory when you open up boxes. So this is for us to be able to drag between the player character and inventories. Does that mean that we're going to be getting like a new, well, if you play a thing like DayZ, when you go to like a collectible or something, it'll open up a sub box and your player. Will we be getting something like that? I mean, part of me wants it. Most of me wants it because that's useful. But will CIG do it because it doesn't seem like the most diegetic thing to do? So one challenge is dealing with attachments, for example, moving a pistol between leg armor and an undersuit. Okay. They also looked into the handling of an inventory stored inside another inventory, which led to them creating multiple windows for the player to move items between. Scenarios like the player dropping the backpack off their character while having the inventory open were also dealt with. So it's good to know that little things like this have been, fixed already, because when thinking about, inventory, what we're getting in 3.14, those are kind of the things that you would think of, like, how can I break? And that's one that they fixed, thankfully. So one small detail, which is looking quite neat, is the player character performing an unstow animation if the user places an item directly into their character's hands. Okay. More animations are always great. So another related area investigated last month is the player leaving a lootable body behind upon death. So here is that confirmation. So for now, this will be achieved by creating a body copy, or imposter, and transferring ownership of the player's items to the copy. This leaves the original player entity free to respawn and able to return to their corpse to retrieve their items. As well as transferring items, this required logic to copy the pose and physical state of one ragdoll to another. This still requires polish to make the transition seamless, but the feature will allow a new dimension when implemented in the future. So there is that whole death of a spaceman kind of thing here. And it looks like, again, like, don't quote me on this, but with physical inventory coming in 3.14, with medical tier 0 coming in 3.14, does this paragraph mean that player bodies are now going to persist? Maybe? So again, it just says they're investigating it. And it talks about how, for now, this will be achieved. Does that mean that they've done it? They say for now. That would be cool. That would change so many things. Like the player character dying, of course, like then respawning, leaving their body behind, and then you having to go back is something that Rich and Chris talked about earlier this year. I guess it means that if you're going exploring or if you're going FPS like combat and stuff, don't take your valuables with you, because if you die, you'll have to go back to your body to get it, like Dark Souls / MMO style. And if, like the person who killed you is vindictive, they might be waiting upon your body, and also they might loot all your good stuff. Yeah, it does sound like a don't get your hopes up with the investigation part, but we'll see. We'll see. So far, nothing is promised, but this is a paradigm change, paradigm shift for like the game. Like that will change how people play Star Citizen. All right, so features. So the feature team spent April looking into must-fix issues for Alpha 3.13 and continuing their work on Alpha 3.13.1 and Alpha 3.14 initiatives. Work also continued on the player asset manager, with the engineers creating the initial building block system to change that crap we currently have, and the provider that manages a majority of the application logic. The provider and the building blocks will be connected via UI bindings, which will let the team pull in essential data they wish to show. Meanwhile, UI design created concepts for the layout of the app, which will be reviewed and edited before a final design is chosen. So we're still a long way until this final PMA change, like where you can play about your assets and equip your gear, but it's happening this year by the looks of it too. So planning continued for the upcoming cargo refactor mentioned last month, with engineering writing up the TDD, or what does TDD stand for in this case? Is it the traders department or whatever, right? So which is now in the review process. From the TDD, the team will look to break down the work into tasks before starting to build the extensive new system. All right. Like it's a trade department division, I think, right? So internal testing for the next dynamic event is currently underway, with minor changes being made daily following feedback from QA. Oh, okay, in this case, it's technical design doc. You see, that's where TDD brackets what you want, because we have something in game called TDD. But thank you, Pete. Thank you. All right, so features mission. So last month, mission features spent some time focusing on Invictus launch week. The team also further developed spawn closets, working on an underground facility as a proof of concept, alongside what's being used on the Javelin. Alright. So again, the Javelin we're going to be seeing the interior of for the first time in a couple weeks' time. So mission features also began supporting hospitals with a refactor of spawning, which had become fragmented as prisons. Criminal spawns and medbeds were added. Okay. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these hospitals work. They talked about a hospital gown being crafted as well, so when you die and you wake up, of course, your body is going to be left where you died. You're going to wake up all naked in a hospital bed. And then you'll have to get from A back to body before, who knows how long it's going to take for a body to despawn. And like, of course, will your stuff still be there? If you got killed by like a squad or an org, they'll likely just strip you of all your stuff just to make sure, even if they don't want your stuff, you're going to have nothing. That's how players operate. We'll see. We'll see. Like, it's pretty extreme. You know, like, as far as MMOs go, like, when you die to, like, lose all your stuff, that's rather extreme. Games that do this or have this mechanic tend to only make this mechanic happen in areas of, like, really, really low law, you know? Like, areas like, let's say, the Wildy in RuneScape, or, like, is it Nullsec in Eve? To have it be, like, the baseline for Star Citizen is kind of metal. Like, it's crazy. Again, paradigm shift. People are going to be so much more careful with their stuff. Alright, so an update to friendly fire logic and splash damage was made. Now, as long as players do more damage to enemies than friendlies, they won't be punished. Okay. So, as long as if you're next to an like a friendly NPC, you can shoot an enemy, you can shoot the friend, but as long as the friend isn't damaged more than the enemy, they'll go, oh, okay. However, they will still receive crime stats if more serious crimes are committed in the initial implementation. This will be most noticeable when using an EMP, so players should still be careful not to cause more friendly damage when firing, so be smart about what you're doing apparently. Okay, so they also added more civilian AI to caves. More civilian AI to caves. And improved their behavior when not in combat. Minor improvements were made to the air traffic control system, and bugs were fixed following player feedback for Alpha 3.13. So let's go back to to AI caves and civilian AI in caves. What does that mean? Like, right now the mission for the AI is to go in there, find somebody, and go, he's dead, Jim, and get paid. I guess it means you'll find AI just mining, doing stuff, but we know that these missions are going to be changing, and we know that like medical gameplay is going to be coming in with a whole scanner system and everything else like that. Star Citizen is an MMO, right? Escort missions are a thing. I think maybe we're a bit too early for escort missions, given how slow AI can be sometimes, but it'll be interesting, you know? Just don't shoot at everything in caves, I guess. Alright, so features. So, vehicle features. So, following the launch of Alpha 3.13 and the first iteration of ship-to-ship docking, ship-to-station docking progressed throughout April, with bugs fixed and release prep work undertaken. So there's a few interesting bugs with ship-to-station right now, especially with things like the hammerhead. They get stuck, and then like the front starts to like go into like super hot, and like you get like, you can dock and undock maybe 6 times before you explode in the PTU, but again, these are the bugs that they're fixing. The new thruster Wind Vfx detailed in March's report was further developed with support from the VFX team. This feature's goals include dust plumes created by individual thrusters as they animate and move on the ship, and effects that change depending on the direction of the thruster to the surface it's interacting with. That's pretty cool too. Like, the initial change to all this, the initial implementation, made it so that like when a ship was to fly, it would just make the planet's general wind like effects just go in that direction the ship is flying, which is already cool. But this is like a level above, which is neat. Alright, so thruster capacitors received development time in April, which will encourage meaningful decision making during combat and close quarter flying. When implemented, afterburners will be powered by capacitors that drain very quickly when used. So if you're like in a really fast ship, you will still be limited by those, the amount of times you can like revector before you make your capacitors get drained. The capacitors will then recharge using the ship's power much more slowly, requiring players to consider firing afterburners carefully. Right, so it just basically means that when you are in a fight, from what I can see here, like you have a limited amount of times where you can like maneuver super fast using your afterburners. And your capacitor is going to be that resource of like how many times can I try and like, checkmate my opponent. After that, then you'll be moving much slower, and then combat will be, I guess it'll make combat faster. Time to like win will be much faster for people who are good at dogfighting. Alright, finally for April, time was spent on improving heads-up display visuals, which will be important for showing information on the various upcoming features, such as above thruster capacitors and missile operator mode, which again is coming out in 3.14. So 3.13 was a lot of like, quality of life and the framework for things, like the Delphi, the reputation manager, and everything else came in with this patch, and also the station docking. 3.14 is bringing more gameplay things, like medical, like this as well, missile operator mode. So yeah, that's gonna be a very interesting one. It always seems like Q2 is the time of year where we get like these big game-changing things. We expect 3.14 towards the end of Q2, so like after June or June 31st. Alright, so graphics and VFX programming. So after a period of bug fixing, the graphics team returned to focusing on the Gen 12 renderer. Most post effects are now running the Gen 12 version by default, and once the final few are enabled, they'll begin enabling geometry passes. This will start with shadows, followed by opaque geometry, and finally transparent geometry. The geometry passes are already partially complete, though there are still problems to solve before they see the expected performance gains. And performance gains are exactly what we want to see. So progress was made on the Vulkan backend to achieve parity with DirectX 11, which requires a pass over all shaders to remove a handful of legacy DirectX 9 features that are no longer supported. The VFX programmers continued the Gen 12 conversion of their code, which is almost complete. General progress was made on the Fire Hazard 2, while a major overhaul of particle lighting was completed. Finally, the particle lighting is now more physically based, energy conserving, i.e. it doesn't reflect more light than it receives, and gives a higher quality result than are most consistent over different lighting scenarios. So in general, just looking good. Alright, then with lighting. So last month, the lighting team moved to predominantly supporting Horizon, with the line of sight being dozens of kilometers away to other platforms. Okay, so lighting information needs to be visible at these distances while maintaining high quality lighting on local platforms. This will likely involve a longer period of polish and optimization than on previous landing zones, with plenty of back and forth between lighting individual platforms and the landing zone as a whole. So Horizon, just by its nature, is going to require some really big lighting changes, and I do hope that, I don't think that we can see Horizon on this screenshot, but this is like basically what it's going to look like from really far away. This is of course Crusader, it's a gas giant, but like, yeah, I look forward to seeing Horizon. I don't want to say it's like gonna be my favorite landing zone or whatever, but it's definitely gonna be the new shiny, It is really nice. The planet as well, again, like the palette has changed, you know, like it's gone from that orange gas giant we've seen to like more blues and pinks. And, you know, I did ask, you know, like early on when we first saw Crusader, everyone's wearing blue. Does that mean that the gas giant Crusader is also going to be blue? And people were like, Myre, you're silly. Well, who's silly now? Anyway. And what do we have here? This looks like, I have no idea. Let's open this up and find out. Industrial platform interior nighttime lighting. So this is on Horizon. This is the interior platform. That's cool. So it's like a refinery. So does that mean that like in the Crusader system, you won't have to like go to a Lagrange points to like to refine stuff? You would have to go like hurl L1 or whatever, or crew L1. Okay, that's cool. All right, let's go back. Hopefully it saved our place. It did. All right. So live content. So live content's April saw them revisit cave missions, improving the AI patrol paths, adding harvestables and minables, and making a general bug sweep with close attention paid to the AI. So they looked at some of the existing caterpillar derelicts and added additional variations to give a more claustrophobic feel, and to introduce the use of tractor beams and trolleys. Oh. So using trolleys inside the caterpillar mission. As well, like as like a platform, like Half-Life style to get to another level. I haven't tried a caterpillar derelict mission yet in 3.13.1. This being talked about here doesn't mean that it's going to be for this patch, but it's what they're currently working on, so it's something to look for. The longer distance quantum sensitive delivery missions were revisited too, with balance tweaks being made to the rewards. And yeah, I believe it was calculated that the quantum sensitive delivery mission on Hurston to go from one pole to another takes, if you're good, about 40 minutes. You know, like if you leave atmosphere, fly at 1,000 meters per second and then land, about 40 minutes. So like, yeah. Thank you for changing that so soon. So once complete, the team largely turns to paper design and prototyping for future releases, with a focus on the comm array missions to help improve and expand PvP gameplay. This involved working on the aforementioned spawn closets in the underground facilities as a proof of concept for the new tech coming online this quarter. All right. So yeah, I mean, like PvP gameplay, yes please. You know, especially with the comm arrays, which I feel like, you know, as far as gameplay in Star Citizen is kind of like getting old, you know. Of course, we've seen the Asiedo like comm arrays at Squadron 42 and how big they are and how different they are. I'm not expecting them all to be like that, but yeah, any changes whatsoever with that would be kind of cool. Especially since I believe hacking tier 0 is coming in 3.14 as well, right? Alright, so narrative. So following the release of Alpha 3.13 last month, the narrative team turned their focus to the next patch and finalizing content for Invictus launch week, which included a voice-over session. Horizon received new audio, set dressing documents, and navigational sign text, while set dressing documentation was completed for the new hospital locations. Cool. So following the release of the Delphi Reputation System, so Delphi, somebody mentioned, was most likely like in reference to the Oracle of Delphi, which I forget exactly why that was so clever, but yeah, the Delphi Reputation Lab. The team had several meetings to discuss the expansion of the reputation system and how to make the player's experience of working with various organizations and contacts more robust and nuanced. And it really does set that framework for like future gameplay. You see the Delphi and you're like, okay, yeah, like I can see like, you know, if I get level 4 with Hurston, maybe I can like unlock certain stuff once components and items and stuff in game start to get locked that way, you know, like so that it's not just about how much UEC you can earn, but like, you know, your reputation and that kind of thing. But yeah, they also coordinated the design of scripts for an upcoming dynamic event and worked on the usual slate of new items requiring naming and descriptions. So again, upcoming dynamic event. So again, Everyone's thinking Ninetales lockdown. I really do hope that CIG do bait us and it's not the Ninetales lockdown, it's something else. Alright, so April also saw a wide range of narrative content, including Jump Point magazine and, for subscribers, new Galactopedia entries, the latest Mining Rocks newsletter from Shubin, the first installment of A Gift for Baba, which is the origin story of the Crusader Moon's names, a brand new feature of Lore Makers Community Questions, where the narrative team provide sought-after answers to questions pulled from the Ask a Dev section of the forums. All right, so we're almost there, guys. So player relations. So PR finalized their recruiting efforts to support the growing needs of the service and backer base, including a remote training program to better onboard new team members. They also announced the launch of the Issue Council 2.0, which improves the team's ability to track, triage, and fix bugs throughout the game. I think that maybe perhaps an Issue Council 2.0 tutorial is something I should do. We might even do it like live after we're done with this. Alright, so props. So last month, the team continued with props for the Colonialism Outposts, which improved working closely with the modular locations team to ensure they're cohesive and fit the homestead feel. And we have a little image here of what looks like a table with a book, some space apples, and a space fern. Props polish for Origin was started, most notably on materials for the whale statue hero asset. So the whale statue hero asset. So that's like this like big space whale sculpture that's supposed to be on like the main promenade. Concept props were created for the hospitals alongside the Montreal-based locations team, including a wheelchair, walker, IV stand, and packaging assets for medical goods. They also progressed with the medical bed gurney, which are nearing completion. The new hospital bed template was rolled out so the hospital beds in ships can now use the new gameplay too. Okay, let me reread that. The new hospital bed template was rolled out so that hospital beds in ships can use the new gameplay too. Does that mean new gameplay for the Cutlass Red? We'll see. Finally, props helped AI content produce new usable templates and shops. And here is that new hospital bed right here. It's looking similar to the one on the 890 jump, but the one on the jump, of course, looks a bit more naff, more old, crappy. So we might see the 890 jump getting this. Maybe not in Crusader Blue, though. Alright, so QA. On the publishing side, QA supported the launch of Alpha 3.13 alongside an incremental patch to fix a few player feedback issues. They then set up and prepared testing strategies for Alpha 3.13.1 and beyond. QA's primary development focus was on testing Invictus launch week, along with another event coming later this year. Maybe the dynamic one. Preliminary testing began on Alpha 3.14 features and content along with performance captures. The Texas-based QA team was also restructured to enable to focus on more specific aspects of the game like ships, careers, locations, missions, and events. This allows testers on each team to have more knowledge in a given area and better test specific features and content. Okay. Systemic services and tools. So April saw the Systemic Services and Tools team wrap up the latest version of the economy and AI simulation tools that control the wider game economy. This is big. Improvements were also added to make recording and presentation easier. So I wonder if that is part of the app we actually showed off in today's stream. In 3.13.1, there's now something in the journal to have a look at the more systemic elements of like supply and demand, which is kind of cool. You can see what stations like have a deficit and what stations have a surplus and go between them now. So for services, work progressed on prepping the Super P cache. So iCache, what's iCache? It's all about P cache now, for the next release. The prototyping of new services, including one for celestial body positioning and one for the accurate tracking of important NPCs, was also completed. important NPCs, so I'm guessing like bounty targets. They also completed service work to pass ship names between the DGS and platform, so the dedicated game server and platform. Though they're still investigating edge cases as time permits. Finally, for SST, work progressed on support for server meshing, which with emphasis on object container hierarchy table seeding. So Tech Animation. Tech Animation began working on a new area of the facial pipeline that'll convert photographs into full head geometry models. Try that one more time. Tech Animation began working on a new area of the facial pipeline that'll convert photographs into full head geometry models. So that's kind of how they've already always done facial capture and stuff. Like when, you know, like from experience, when they did my head at, you know, like 2017, it was like 50 odd cameras, like DSLR cameras that they use, and then like a program turns that into an in-game model. But yeah, the process itself has been used for years, exactly, that's what I thought, but this initiative sees the team automating as much as possible to enable the artist to focus on art rather than time-consuming technical processes. That is fair. That is fair. This involves utilizing several applications and streamlining all required data through them without the user interaction. Okay. The weapons authoring pipeline also received attention to assist its users and automate as much as possible. This will see Myre become more intelligent with how, that's a leap, with how it handles engine files and enables a portion of the authoring and validation directly into the environment. Am I going to be in the game? Not personally, unless I somehow like work with CIG and become an actor for CIG and that kind of thing, which I don't know. I'll apply if there's a casting call. But like, I just happened to be one of the people who lucked out when they did like a luck of the draw thing in 2017, because they wanted to show off or showcase their like face over IP like thing. Like, let me see. Just because it's a thing. So like, that's what it looks like essentially. So like, they take a lot of pictures of your head, and then the actual image here in the center, that is actually not me, that's a 3D model, like using all those images. Yeah, CIG totally owned my 2017 face. Alright, so Turbulent is next, I think, or is it Tech Animation? I think it's Turbulent. Oh, the weapons authoring pipeline also received attention to assist its users and automate as much as possible. Yep, we read that. So Turbulent. Collaborating with the core tech and networking teams, Turbulent's game services delivered the first iteration of the Entity Graph service. Many teams depending on this are now able to move forwards. An entity tool was also created for testing and creating test scenarios. New teammates were onboarded, who will be focusing on moving Hex to the next level. So Hex doesn't mean Grim Hex, Hex means something else. They started their roles performing maintenance and clearing out high priority bugs and tasks. And then both teams completed a few support tasks for Alpha 3.13 and its incremental patches, but mostly continued tasks for Alpha 3.14. Hex is in the roadmap. Okay. The web team supported the various promotions that launched in April, including Alpha 3.13 and the Greycat Rsi DS, which is that. All right. Leave your comments about how much you like the DS in chat. I mean, in not in chat, in the YouTube comments. Yeah. All right. So UI. The UI team worked on several elements throughout April that will help UI screens in future releases. They created a yellow, low-tech style to better match locations such as Lorville, as well as a blue Crusader-style UI to use in its ships and on Orison itself. So are we going to see a change to the MSR? They also created a small yet useful widget such as foreground and background textures, manufacturer logos, and new buttons that will be used in an upcoming update to the door control UI. A tweak was also made to the transit screens so that they look and work in a similar way. Though they will be able to have any UI style applied in the future. Finally, for UI, the developers gained the ability to add tooltips to screens and made bug fixes and optimizations for Alpha 3.13. Hey, I'm not baiting saltiness. I just want to know. I just want to know. So, vehicle tech. Last month, the vehicle technical team began tying down the radar and scanning system features and focused on testing functionality to ensure a clear and satisfying experience. In support of the Tumbrel Nova, they worked to make it feel and look appropriately tanky by focusing on animation timing and wheel surface debris. A list of must-fix issues were addressed for Invictus launch week, with work continuing into May to ensure that the event runs as smoothly as possible. Fingers crossed. So lastly, VFX. The VFX team spent part of April making thruster effects more readable at distance, and we saw some of this in ISC, essentially making it so that we see long blue trails that will then resolve into looking more, I guess, realistic is the word, when you get closer to the ships. This work followed a similar pattern to last year's weapon effects readability task, where they looked at the game holistically in team playtests to get a better understanding of what visual information players need to improve their gameplay experience. Which is, there's always that question, do the devs ever play the game? Well, yes, they do. In the case of thrusters, being able to see them from further distances is desirable, so various tweaks were made to the effects to make this possible, though the process is ongoing. So some new firework effects were created to give the design team a larger library to choose from for various gameplay events, with further progress, while further progress was made on large-scale destruction events, specifically testing out the pipeline from conception to the end result in-game. The Nova Tonks VFX were further polished too, including its cannon, which, we're gonna see no shortage of cannon firing GIFs and animations and stuff on Reddit, I'm sure. Then, on the feature side, work continued on thruster wind volumes, and the new effects for vehicle radar ping blobs made progress. And of course, radar ping and everything to do with that is going to be talked about in today's ISC for anybody who's watching this on YouTube today, or with us live on Twitch. Alright, so that's that for this monthly report for the month of April 2021. Thank you so much for watching that with me, or I suppose reading that with me. We'll be doing the next monthly report, and we'll keep this series going for as long as we do them live on Twitch. If you are enjoying them on YouTube, please leave a comment below, and I'll continue to put them out, because why the heck not? Until we see you next time, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.